Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Zcrew podcast. And today, it is Monday, August 4th, 2025. Of course, we are officially 1 week closer to the start of the 2025 NFL regular season. I am absolutely fired up and cannot wait for this season, guys. It's going to be a very exciting season. Now, of course, got to talk about today's team, the Chicago Bears. Of course, one of the most overrated and hyped up teams last season. Very, very disappointing year for the Bears last year. 2024, the Bears finished the season 5-12 and ended up firing head coach Matt Eberflus after the Thanksgiving loss to the Detroit Lions. Of course, now I don't think it was much of a surprise. Nobody did not expect the Bears to fire Matt Eberflus. Of course, they did have some very tough games last year. They lost on that Hail Mary. You guys know what's his name? Tyree Stevenson, chirping to the fans there in D.C. Cost the Bears a really tough game. And now, of course, the Bears at that point before that game were 4-2, tied for first place in the NFC North, of course. After that game, they did end up losing, I believe, 8 or 9 in a row. So tough to see that, of course. They did lose a few games on last-second blocked field goals, also very tough. But, of course, that Thanksgiving game was the final straw as we saw Matt Eberflus kind of took like 40 seconds off the clock. It was very weird. In fact, I have never seen anything like that before, where they literally took 40 seconds off the clock, had 2 timeouts, and literally just sat there and let the clock go all the way down to like 10 seconds, and then he threw an incomplete pass and ended up losing the game. Pretty inexcusable, so of course he got fired for that. Now, of course, the Bears last season, I would say Caleb Williams. This time last year, people said, maybe myself included as well, said that Caleb Williams was walking into the best situation for any rookie quarterback. Now, of course, they might have meant receivers, but definitely did not mean offensive line because obviously everyone knows the Bears' offensive line last year was pretty bad. Of course, they did not protect Caleb Williams at all. And I do actually feel bad for him last year because he genuinely looked like he was getting the you-know-what beat out of him every single time, which basically he was. So, very tough year for Caleb Williams last year. For the Bears in general, obviously missed the playoffs. But now, guys, that brings us to 2025, where the future is looking bright for Chicago. Of course, the Bears headlined this offseason by stealing away offensive coordinator Ben Johnson to now become their head coach from the Detroit Lions. Of course, getting him from their division rival Detroit Lions is huge because many of you guys know the Lions have built an amazing offense the last 3 to 4 seasons. He's been putting together a very great offense. Now, of course, eventually he was going to get hired as a head coach. Now, year 2 for Caleb Williams is very, very much a lot of pressure on him again as well. He now finally has a good, competent head coach that's going to do and help him be the best he truly can be again. I almost feel like last season he has to undo some of the learning and some of the stuff he picked up on last training camp. Again, probably because whole new coaching staff, really different scheme, obviously, way new playbook. So I just completely have to reset and kind of start over where he should have started over last year. But again, just kind of try to flush last year. They really improved their offensive line. Again, guys, I think the Bears really amazingly improved their offensive line. Shout out to GM Ryan Poles, who's a great GM, in my opinion. Awesome guy. They acquired All-Pro guard and future Hall of Famer Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, this is a guy who can play center, either guard spot or any tackle position. Truly, the ultimate offensive lineman, one of the greatest in the entire NFL. And they actually traded for him. So, huge addition for them. They also signed free agent center Drew Dahlman from the Atlanta Falcons, another good signing, as well as also signing standout left tackle Jonah Jackson from the Los Angeles Rams. Now, of course, they addressed their main needs, which was offensive line. Of course, got to protect the young guy. Especially with the offense that Ben Johnson wants to run, lots of play action. If you guys think about the Lions' offense last season, lots of play action, lots of kind of plays that take time to develop downfield. So that means what? You got to protect your guy, especially the blind side. So if you can put Joe Thuney, I'm sure they'll probably play Thuney at guard, but, they have standout Darnell Wright at left tackle, so I think he's pretty good. But again, just really adjusting that offensive line, trying to protect Caleb as best they can there. Of course, that'll be best for his development in year 2. Now, of course, the Bears had a pretty surprisingly good draft too. My fault. Pretty good draft. They drafted with the 10th overall pick in this year's draft. They selected Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. Now, if you ask me, I would have probably drafted Tyler Warren over him because I think Tyler Warren out of Penn State was the better tight end prospect, and the Bears picked him at number 10. And I believe that Tyler Warren fell to pick like 15 to the Colts, but still, they picked a standout tight end. He was a very good college tight end, was Colson Loveland, so I think he'll fit their offense pretty well. As well, the Bears drafted wide receiver Luther Burton in the second round out of Missouri. Now, this guy is an absolute stud. I think he definitely should have been a first-round talent, and the fact that the Bears got him in the second round is huge for them. So, now you're looking at DJ Moore, wide receiver 1. You got year 2 Roma Dunze, who I'm very high on, and also Luther Burton as your third receiver. Pretty stacked. As well as rookie Colson Loveland. And I also am a big fan of their running back, DeAndre Swift. Of course, had a rough year as well because of their offensive line. But, again, with the good O-line, I think a big year for Swift is ahead. Especially, you got to think about, again, the Lions' offense. What did they have last year? Sonic and Knuckles very rely heavily on their running game. So I expect a big year, fantasy-wise too. Big year for, not Jahmyr Gibbs, for DeAndre Swift for the Bears in year 2. Now, of course, guys, the Bears' main issue, I think, could be their defense. Of course, the last 100 years, trust me, I know Michael Wilbon, the last 100 years, the Bears' issues have been their offense. But now, I think in 2025, what could really hold them back is potentially their defense. Now, they have some studs and some playmakers out there. Now, their secondary is elite. They got standout cornerback Jalen Johnson, who, in my opinion, is a top 10 corner. Also got Tyree Stevenson, who's also sorry for the noise there. Tyree Stevenson, very interesting player last year. Might have cost his team a couple games last year, but that's okay. He's a pretty good corner. Also got third-year safety out of Penn State. A big fan of mine. I am of Jaquan Brisker. Very good safety. And also have year 2 with free agent, Kevin Byard from the Tennessee Titans. So pretty good secondary. Now, the Bears, one of my main concerns for them is their pass rush. They do have standout edge rusher, left end, Montez Sweat, the sack machine. And they also signed free agent from the Falcons, Grady Jarrett, who is a bit older. But I do think the Bears' defense could be a little troubling for them because I do think their age could harm them, could be bad for them. Now, they do also have their guy, Tremaine Edmonds, is a great linebacker, very underrated linebacker in my opinion. I believe he's top 3 in tackles the last 3 years. I might be mistaken. But I do think Tremaine Edmonds is a top 10 linebacker. But I still think their defense could have some holes in it that could potentially hurt them down the season. Of course, they are playing in the best division in football, the NFC North. You got the Packers twice, the Packers twice, the Lions twice, and the Vikings twice. And, of course, the Bears open their season at Minnesota, I believe. So, right off the bat, actually, I think they're home against the Vikings and at Green Bay week 2. So, right off the bat, 2 tough divisional games to start off with. So, the Bears got to start off hot. Now, guys, the one thing I will say about the Bears, I do expect them to be a little bit slow offensively to start the season. Of course, they're learning a whole new scheme and a whole new playbook. It is going to take some time and just, reps in general and especially game time. So, preseason is very important for the Bears to get as familiar with their playbook, mainly offensively again. But I still think it's going to be a better year for the Bears. I do see them going 7-12 this season. I don't actually know 7-10 I have them going. I got to do the math with 18 games. 7-10 I have them going. I do think they're going to be a little better than last year, but I just don't see them making the playoffs. I'm sorry, Bears fans. I don't see them making the playoffs this year. I think their division is too tough, and I think their schedule is too tough. But I do see Mr. Caleb Williams taking a huge step in the right direction. I believe Ben Johnson is the perfect guy for this guy, perfect guy for this offense, perfect head coach for this team. This team needs discipline. They need to be coached, and they need to come from a coach who's done some stuff in years past. But, guys, without further ado, that's going to do it for today's video. Again, I do see the Bears going 7-12, missing the playoffs, but it's because it doesn't mean I'm not expecting big things out of Caleb this year. Now, of course, before we wrap today's video, guys, I want to give a quick shout-out to the O's. The O's played some tough games against the Cubs this weekend. They almost won 2 out of 3. They did end up losing on a walk-off yesterday. That's okay. Tonight, we are in Philadelphia at the Phillies. 6:45, you got Cade Povich coming off the injured list, making his first start since mid-June. So we're very excited to see Mr. Povich tonight going up against Jesus Luzardo for the Phillies. So that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Thanks for watching. This has been an episode of the Zcrew Podcast. Let's go, O's.